welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here, joined by Jonathan Sabbagh, who is co-founder at Journey Clinical. Are you also the CEO?
I'm also the CEO.
All right, great. So excited to have you on. We've been in kind of talks for, it feels like months now. Sorry about that. And then Kyle has actually been, was he kind of an early member of your services?
Kyle was one of our first members, actually. So he was really one of the first alpha early adopters that we brought on when we were, building our basically co-design group, and he came on as a design partner. So it was really great to help him out, have him help us out, understand what we were doing and how we were doing it and what we needed to change.
Yeah. All right. So before we do like a really deep dive background, let's talk just high level. What does Journey Clinical do?
Sure. So Journey Clinical is a telehealth platform that enables psychotherapists to incorporate psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies, starting with ketamine, in their practice. And basically what we do is we take on the medical functions. So we take on patient eligibility, prescriptions, outcome monitoring, and we support a collaborative care model that, basically allows us to create bespoke treatment plans at scale. So we're a delivery mechanism.
I love it. Yeah. So this idea of you have to go to a centralized organization to be able to, do this kinds of services, like, move to a big city, find the right people, not exactly true anymore, right? You've got this kind of more democratic model, it seems.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I think that a lot of people, we're all trying to solve for accessibility, and not everybody can go to these big cities, like you say, go to some of these larger clinics, and so being able to have a provider locally is a big deal. But I think maybe a little bit more than that is the notion that you don't necessarily want to be referred out. And you want to be working with your therapist. It's so hard to be referred out. It's a weird process. People feel uncomfortable. It's a new learning experience. And so what we're looking to do basically is essentially enable licensed psychotherapists to add these treatments as an adjunct to therapy. To us, the paradigm shift is, EMDR, mindfulness, psychedelics. Like that's the toolkit.
That's interesting. I actually haven't seen much data yet around the EMDR. Can you, have you seen anything there, trend wise, or that you can speak to about like ketamine and EMDR?
Yeah, not really, but I also wasn't referring to combining them both. What I meant by that was basically, as a psychotherapist, what we want is that, they have various treatment modalities. Right. One of the options is psychotherapy, psychedelic therapy.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No. I was actually at a Swiss restaurant last night, so a little foggy still.
No problem. Did you have fondue?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Too much. So let's dig in to your background. So from what I recall, not necessarily the traditional therapist kind of wanting to get involved, right? You had a different background, and then you found an angle to get involved.
Yeah. I mean, my background originally is finance. So I'm Swiss, actually, and so is my co-founder. But I spent the first 20 years of my career working in finance, mostly in hedge funds. And I did a variety of things, including building 2 businesses from the ground up. But 10 years ago, when I was building that first business, I actually suffered a pretty substantial burnout, which turned out to be the result of undiagnosed complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that, led me to recognize that I had some substance abuse issues that I've been dealing with for some time, that I had to be put on quite a lot of medication and go through a lot of psychotherapy until about 5 years ago. I started working with ayahuasca, and then I started working with ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And that was, of course, extremely transformative for me, very helpful. I was able to get off medication, live a more integrative life. But it also prompted a career pivot. I actually decided to quit finance and go back to school to study clinical psychology. And so, as I was in school at the new school, I actually, I didn't have a GED. So I did my GED at the age of 38 and became an undergrad. And while I was in this process, I felt the need to integrate my background as an entrepreneur with my long term goal of becoming a psychedelic therapist. I also got a chance to meet Igmar Gorman, who I know you guys know well, who became a member of our board. And as we were thinking through this, that's kind of the genesis of how Journey came to be. But I
Mm,
also eventually, so I'm on a sabbatical now, but I do want to go back to school at some point and finish my get a PhD.
yeah. I think that's my retirement plan as a PhD.
It's a good retirement plan.
um, well, that's great. That's great. And I guess commenting on the um, lifestyle of doing finance, like it's a really intense job. People might not understand how intense, but it's like really abstract, right? Like just like the whole world is now numbers, and yeah, you're having to live in this really really strange abstracted landscape, and not only are you trying to like do your regular life, but you also have this underlying like kind of trauma setup that you've got to also watch, or I hope, but often that doesn't happen when you're in a hard charging kind of work environment like that.
I think that, well, co-founding and building a startup, I think, is more intense actually than working in finance substantially.
That's good to know.
You're basically working 14-hour days. I don't think we've had a weekend in a couple of months,
Hmm.
maybe a year. So we're about to take our first vacation in almost 2 years. So it's been pretty intense. But I think that it has to be fun, and you
Hmm.
have to enjoy what you're doing. And some people love finance, and that's great. And so there's some very good people in finance, and some people. But I felt a misalignment with the work I was doing, and I think that becomes difficult to sustain when you're something that's extremely demanding. And quite frankly, I don't believe that any job can be well done if you're not really putting yourself into it. And so any job can be fulfilling, and all professions are valuable. But I found purpose in what I'm doing. And so, as much as my rhythm has actually increased from the days I worked in finance, I feel energized because I'm having a good
Hmm.
time. I feel that this is where I want to be. And that's a big deal, I think, for the mindset.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, my experience starting psychedelics today, it got a lot better and easier after I didn't have two jobs,
Right.
but it was still super intense.
Yeah. I think my
Yeah.
co-founder would argue the same. So she's also my wife, and we can definitely talk about that one. But she was working two jobs when we started Journey Clinical. She was still in an AI startup, and splitting that, and also context changing, and that's very demanding. So I definitely, I can't relate directly, but I understand what you're talking about.
Well, as can relate as well as possible indirectly, so I get it. That's great. So the software angle. So before we get into like the ketamine kind of angle, so can you talk about what maybe differentiates your telehealth platform?
Yeah, I mean, this is very much in the early stages, so I
Hmm.
can't deep dive too much into the functionalities that we're going to be building out. But essentially, we're going to have portals for the therapist, portals for the patients, portals for us, the prescriber, and it's going to offer a variety of resources that I think will really help support therapists and you know expanding their service, increasing the quality of their offering, and supporting the patients.
Mm, that's
And
cool. Yeah.
we've hired, just to be clear, we've just hired director of engineering, and we're hiring a whole
Hmm.
dev team. So who came from
Okay, so the
uh,
software is a little bit, yeah, gotcha.
yeah,
No, it's good because there's a lot left to do, right?
yeah.
In terms of there's other people kind of entering the space. You can see what they've done right and
Hmm.
wrong, and try to do your own thing, which
Yeah,
I
I
find
think
really important.
I think our vision is extremely robust and creative, and I'm excited to
Hmm.
share it. While I am being a little cagey, it's because it's still in stealth mode a little bit, but
Hmm.
I think it will answer a lot of the pain points that we've been able to identify over the last 9 months working with these practitioners to see what works and what doesn't, and gathering their feedback. So we've done a lot of product market fit.
So I think you're in a really interesting place to comment on this thing. Is probably as complex a question as I can come up with at this hour, but it's around kind of data privacy on a platform like this. So somebody came at me with an attack recently because we had
Hmm.
somebody on who's doing kind of a hopefully having some sort of big data approach and digital phenotyping stuff like that. I'm kind of curious if you could I say you have an interesting perspective because you're Swiss and data privacy laws over there are incredibly intense. So, like, how do you at Journey Clinical have an eye on kind of a data approach here, like anonymizing data, being able to do research with it, or anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. So we're going to be a HIPAA compliant platform. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
building our whole platform to be completely HIPAA compliant. So we have to, respect very rigid guidelines. It's very rigorous. It's very intense. And so that's definitely something we're working into. We're also going to be looking to create research. So obviously, we want to anonymize data. We do have a relationship with Osmind's EHR to sort of be able to deliver that. So we're very conscientious about, not sharing patient data. It's just part of our model.
Right. And it's funny, right? Like the critiques coming over were scathing, as if there was like a data privacy issue. But it's if you're HIPAA compliant, which if you're operating in the US, you have to be.
Mhm.
If you don't know the penalties around HIPAA violations, they're aggressive and terrifying.
We
So
actually don't have to be HIPAA compliant, to be
oh,
clear.
really?
We looked at it, and our
Mm-hmm.
attorneys. So we've got pretty large healthcare law firms. You know,
Mm-hmm.
looking through every little minute detail of our business model, and we could not be HIPAA compliant because of the way we're set up. But we choose to
Mm-hmm.
be HIPAA compliant to accommodate that. So we're adding that extra layer of safety.
Oh, excellent. That's interesting. So, all right, food for thought. And yeah, I guess that's an interesting way to look at it, since if you don't have that kind of relationship. Okay, cool. And so, will there be a health records component to the telehealth program?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
cool, cool. Yeah, I think it's just there's so much room for software to be able to solve a lot of these problems for
Mhm.
us. Are you interested in enabling telehealth ketamine
Oh, sorry. Just
facilitated
to go back to
sessions?
your earlier question, do you
Sure.
mean are we going to be developing an EHR? Is that what your question was?
As part of the telehealth platform.
I don't think so immediately. We'll probably, white label. We've done one thing already, and we'll keep doing
Hmm.
that. But we'll see.
Yeah, cool, cool, cool. And then with the telehealth platform, are you hoping to do remote ketamine administration or remote guided sessions?
We support both. We support in person and remote. Um, we feel that because of the safety of the container that we support, right? Because we're supporting a collaborative care model where we're only working with licensed mental health professionals, those dynamics are safe to support remote cap. And because of the care management system that we've built and the frequent and in-depth patient interactions that we have, we're comfortable doing that.
Yeah. So I think I generally like the idea of remote ketamine delivery and guided sessions. I guess where I see some room for caution is when it's not necessarily a trained therapist or something, and maybe the person has a pretty substantial psychiatric history,
Hmm.
and that seems a little dicey. And I know you know what I'm talking about here, but do you have any kind of comments about how that kind of scenario could impact the scene generally?
Yeah, it's very important to have a robust container to monitor for patient outcomes. You know, I don't really have comments about other companies. I do can remark that there really hasn't been any kind of dramatic incident. I'm
Right.
sure we would have definitely heard about it in the papers, which we didn't. I
Hmm.
think that the way we've looked at it is that the therapeutic alliance between the patient and the psychotherapist is essential to integrating the insights that are received during these sessions and enacting long-term behavioral change. And so that's the model that we support at Journey
Hmm.
Clinical. And so, because, as you correctly pointed out, we're only working with licensed mental health professionals and we only work with patients who are in a relationship with one of our member psychotherapists, the container is pretty solid, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coupled with frequent interactions with our clinicians who speak with the patient, but also work with the psychotherapist. So we're basically their in house doctor.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, is there? All right, so let's jump into the ketamine side, and I want to see how if we can kind of like break down how this process works. So, um, a therapist enters into a relationship with Journey Clinical. Is that maybe where I'll have you describe it
Yeah, sure.
as
No
opposed to me
problem.
describing it for
Yeah,
you?
no problem. So basically, if you are a psychotherapist, you become a member of Journey Clinical. And, we'll, even before you become a member, we're going to, tier you, have a conversation to evaluate your skill set, so to make sure that you're the right fit for the network. And, depending on your background or not, we might ask you to take our educational videos, for example. And then, let's say that once you're in our network, you're going to refer a patient back to us. We're going to do a 1 hour intake with the patient, and we're going to take full medical history, psychiatric history. If that patient is eligible for CAP, there's going to be a small amount of ketamine mailed to the patient's home. It's sublingual ketamine that we work with. And that patient will do an in person or potentially remote CAP session with their psychotherapist. They're trained to essentially only do the patient basically administers any kind of medical procedure to themselves, right? The
Mm-hmm.
psychotherapists are only administering a psychotherapy session. They'll come back to us pretty quickly for reevaluation, dose adjustments, and then we'll see them on average 4 times a year for full half-hour consultations. So we're
Oh wow.
absolutely not a pill mill. We're really, if you think about it, the ketamine is, again, an adjunct to therapy. That's what we believe. So in every aspect of how we consider this work, the medicine is always as an adjunct either to medical evaluations, to psychotherapy, but never simply delivering medicine to people.
That's pretty substantial. That kind of time. Um, I would prefer it was like 6 hours, but I get we can't be so free with a psychiatrist time.
Right. And also, I mean, just
Mhm.
to be clear, these are medical consultations to check on outcomes, eligibility, but then psychotherapy sessions, CAP sessions, are usually 3 hour sessions.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah. And I guess further to clarify, not all ketamine, is delivered remote. You said you support both earlier. So,
Absolutely.
I don't want to speak too much for Kyle here, but I know he has been doing a lot of in-person CAP since working with Journey. And it's been cool to have him just get that kind of experience under his belt. And this is going to be a funny journey, right? Because there's so great word choice, didn't mean it on purpose, but because we're going to see so many different therapists come in and have their own personal experience with their clients and patients, and it's going to be quite the process to now all of a sudden we have thousands of people with experience facilitating and providing therapy this way, and I think there's going to be some really interesting evolutions in the space. Have you thought about this much?
100%. So I think that it's a great point. You know, we don't really believe in a cookie cutter approach to these treatments.
Mm.
I know that there's the tendency to have almost this canonical view of like, this is the way things need to be happening, and this is the number of sessions you're going to get, and then you'll be fine. And that's absolutely not how it pans out or happens, actually. People often go in, get treatments, then come back for boosters, and that's like, ongoing and different for everybody. And that makes sense because treatments usually are, in general, medical treatments, save a few, especially on the psychiatric realm, different or tailored to everybody. And the power of our model is that we can essentially deliver bespoke treatment plans at scale by supporting the styles and need of the various therapists we're interacting with. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to see evolving more and more and that we're going to gear towards.
Mm. Can you talk about how that's different from other models you might have seen out there?
I mean, because other models are essentially selling a centralized protocol, which is fine. I think we're looking from the angle of the psychotherapist to match their needs. And I think that's a little
Mm,
bit different.
that does seem different. So, say you're, I try to come up with like a snarky anonymized name. I don't know, Mr. Ketamine, Incorporated, and you go in. Theoretically, the clinician might not have the same kinds of discretion and kind of autonomy over working in the way they think is best for them and their clients. Something along those lines. So like they kind of force you into a model to a degree, as opposed to you can be kind of like intervention fluid or
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to criticize any other model. I think
mhm,
genuinely, I have to say people overall doing things pretty responsibly, like because of simply
mhm,
the lack of negative outcomes and the overall effectiveness of this treatment.
mhm,
I think that there's a baseline medical protocol, but there are various styles of psychotherapy. There's a lot of them, and there's various situations with patients and needs. And there's also room for creativity in how we, administer these medicines, what context, group therapy, for example. I mean, there's a lot of cool
mhm,
stuff that can be done, and I think we're going to be extremely excited to be able to support them in a variety of ways. Yeah, while keeping a very robust baseline protocol. So of course, it's important to understand in everything that I'm saying that journey clinical clinicians are the only ones who are able to take any kind of medical decision or decide eligibility, format, frequency, and dosing. So that's really, really not something that we're enabling anybody who's not a medical professional to do.
mhm,
But because of the collaborative care model, we're able to adapt it to what the needs of the therapist and the patients are.
mhm. That's excellent. Okay, got it. Um, and you mentioned earlier training. So like depending on somebody's background, they might be able to um, sidestep the training, or they might have
Yeah.
to go through certain trainings. How is your
Yeah.
training situation
So
working
it's not a
right now?
training per se. It's not a certification. It's
Okay.
educational videos that were
Okay.
created for us. We don't have a certification. We're comfortable with the fact that we're supporting them with a number of other offerings on top of that, which will be rolling out soon. But we're obviously trying to be safe about it. We are also, accepting other trainings, right? So if people come from other groups, we're very, very happy to work with them. We do speak with other training groups, and these are relationships that we build.
Mm, excellent. Um, yeah, no, that's a cool way to go
But
about it.
to be clear, we're looking to build a very robust support system for the psychotherapist to help them work through any kind of adverse events, transference to the medicine, counter transference, how that
Hmm.
works out, giving them a support network. Like the offering that we're going to roll out is pretty substantial.
That's pretty cool. Is there um, is there a model for like that kind of support for therapists that you're basing it on? Like, is there, I don't know, kind of an ideal in another field that you're modeling it off that you can speak to, or
I think there's a lot of community offerings and online communities that help support our vision. But I think it's really if I don't think so. I think it's kind of new. I think that
yeah, cool.
it's based on what's being done currently in the psychedelic space, in the training space, and combining that with what kind of technological evolutions are happening and what's possible.
Right
And
on.
I think generally we're all like COVID. The upside of COVID was that we were, I guess, propulsed into having to rethink really creatively how we do things
Hmm.
to accommodate this new way of living. And I think that's we're very much where we're at Journey Clinical as well, like in terms
That's
of like
great.
facilitating that. And I think we're well
That's
positioned to
great.
do it.
Um, can you talk about any kind of success stories you've had with like either therapists being over the moon excited or clients?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really amazing feedback from some of our therapists. One therapist said that Journey is to therapy what ketamine is to patients, or to therapists of what ketamine is to patients. So that was a pretty rewarding um, feedback. We've had a therapist say that they've had tears come to their eyes because of the work that we're allowing them to do or supporting them to do. And I think that one of the beautiful things about our mission and being able to work with these amazing people is that we're able to allow them to bring what could be an underground therapy above ground in a legal way, incorporate it in their practice, and really support them. So to us, that's really one of the big successes. We've had other really wonderful feedback was supporting people who were burning out with patients who are not progressing. I mean, I think people don't talk about this enough, about the impact of being with patients who are stuck and who are not progressing in their therapy for years. And that's really a big driver of therapist burnout. And we've had people work with patients who were, stuck, really stagnant in their progress, have
Mhm.
a few ketamine sessions and have major breakthroughs at a reasonably low dose, and say, "Wow, this person has never been so open. This has changed the psychotherapy," and that really re-energizes them. And I think that is just really wonderful for us to observe. So I think if you're coming back to analogy on finance, where it's a little bit removed and opaque, being in a dynamic where we're able to almost instantly see the results of our work, and that's hugely encouraging and gratifying for us.
I love that. Um, there is some interesting critiques on ketamine on I can't even say interesting really on Twitter recently, and it was kind of it seemed like a mix of doctors, finance guys, and people in culture kind of commenting on ketamine, saying, "Aren't we just throwing a substandard drug at people?" I'm like, well, I and turning people into alcoholics again. There's all sorts of crazy things that we're throwing out there on Twitter, and we had to comment on it on our episode last Friday to say there's a lot of hope here. Yes, we need to be cautious. That's why there's certain kinds of doctors in the mix that can help steer this thing in the right direction, and probably feedback from the therapist, thus the collaborative care model.
Mhm.
So it seems a little overblown, but I don't know. How have you all thought about these kinds of risks and how to just keep improving,
Yeah.
performance and safety?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. First of all, I think it's good that there's a healthy discourse of back and forth
Mm-hmm.
in the community. It's good to have voices that are for and against, and having people who challenge us constantly is important to make sure that we're kept honest and thinking about it. So I don't see such an issue with hearing these thoughts these thought streams
Right.
emerge. I think that from our point of view, having extremely robust medical protocols, having frequent patient interactions, having a very strong care management system supported by a collaborative care model where there's a therapeutic alliance between a patient and a psychotherapist brings a pretty strong layer of security to make sure that people are doing this therapy safely. And we're not, we don't send people a lot of ketamine, so we're a very expensive and onerous approach to score ketamine. So it's not the right place for people to abuse drugs at Journey Clinical, and that's kind of how we've approached that.
Right. Like the the pure quantity of ketamine required to be a recreationalist or whatever, somebody with a problem is massive, and it
Yeah,
is far beyond what you can really get in a medical situation.
yeah, and we're
Um,
also really cautious about sort of approaching, because our model is based on the number of sessions that they're doing with their psychotherapist, and
mhm.
so they're not stockpiling it.
Right. I remember that being an interesting thing years ago when I first started learning about CAP. Um, one clinician we know would actually prescribe and let them take it home, but if they had one violation, they just weren't able to get more ketamine from this facility anymore.
Yeah, we have
Like,
we have similar protocols that would, if people don't um, abide by our agreements, we don't we stop working with them for sure.
mm-hmm.
And by the way,
Yeah,
just to be clear, there's probably a world where at home use also makes sense, but it's again supported by It's not probably, there is a world where at-home use makes sense and it's done, but it's supported by a therapeutic relationship. It's based on an evolution of someone who's gone through multiple steps of working with a CAP, of gaining the trust of the therapist and doctor is working with, and seeing that they can function in that way. It's not maybe necessarily off the bat, but it's important to understand the full spectrum of that treatment from start to finish and do it responsibly. Again, through frequent patient interactions and having a robust therapeutic alliance with a psychotherapist.
Right. Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it. Um, hmm. And I do think there is a robust future for at home use in some context. We just got to really be creative and, consider what segments of the population might that be best for, and, keep iterating towards perfect and minimizing harmful outcomes. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, hmm.
And I think that comes. I mean, like, that's just obviously that's our shtick, but we believe that it needs to be in CAP sessions, in a collaborative care model, that things are very clear, that people agree on how to evolve that process. But I mean, obviously, at Journey Clinical, we're supporting the CAP model.
Mm. And have you fielded many kind of complaints or concerns from people who like only want to see this done inside a physical clinic?
Oh,
Just like critiques. Like I don't usually like the critiques. I feel like they're really partialistic, maybe. Not really seeing the whole picture.
yeah. I mean, I understand the varieties of perspective that can come up,
Mm-hmm.
where some people feel that it has to be, an in-person IV. Others who feel that it has to be in person, and others who feel that it's comfortable and remote cap is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to judge anybody's perspective. It's such an early stage in our industry. The only thing that we can do is base our decision making and our offering on the opinions of medical professionals who have a lot of experience in the field. That's what we do. Our medical director is an MD PhD from Harvard. He's got 20 years of experience working with ketamine. Our lead clinician comes from MAPS. She's a doctorate who's a professor at Columbia University. We have another DNP from Columbia. So we're very conscientious about how we build our medical protocols, and that supports our model. But I understand that some people feel that you really need to be in person. I think also the administration method, so the if it's sublingual versus IM, makes a huge difference, and the quantity, the dose and the quantity also is important to know. And then I think the last point about at home use is making sure, for example, that there's a guardian, that there's someone who's there, uh, who can sit for the person while this is happening, is also an
Mm-hmm.
important point. So there's ways between sort of like the medical protocol, the delivery method of ketamine, or the means of administration, the amount of administration, and the setting in which these sessions are done, where you can build a pretty safe container.
Yeah, absolutely. I
I'm not sure,
agree.
however, that someone giving themselves an IV infusion on their own would be safe. So that might be more complicated.
Yeah, that's more like when the nurse comes to the house.
Right.
Yeah, that's a different deal. Yeah. Yeah, I've not gone that far yet. I'm imagining it right now. I'm like, nah, it's probably not going to work for me. Um, so, um, Now, what states or countries, or where are you operating currently?
Yeah. So right now, so we're a U.S. based business. We're operating in New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts, but we're opening multiple states in the next couple of months. So we'll be, eventually we'll be a national service.
Oh, outstanding. Outstanding. And is there a plan to go look internationally for you for Journey Clinical?
I think for now we're gonna do the U.S. and see where that goes. Why
Right
not?
on.
But you gotta do one thing and do it right.
Right. Can you speak to this situation? Other countries just don't have the same kind of developed CAP infrastructure that we have here, and ours is not really all that great yet. Like, what do you think's going on internationally? I know Australia had some kind of prescription issues years and years ago that
Hmm.
impacted ketamine's availability now. But are you aware of any kind of situations in Europe or elsewhere
I mean, a
holding
little
this
bit.
back?
I know that the UK have been a little more forward in developing these offerings. I know Israel is pretty advanced in terms of psychedelic therapy in general, so they've been pretty innovative, and they
Hmm.
always usually are. Like countries like other countries, I think is the notion of off-label prescription maybe is the biggest problem, and the risks associated with off-label prescriptions, especially if controlled substances, may limit how people work with them. And also
Hmm.
maybe, I mean, look, we're also in the US pretty advanced in psychedelic therapy. We've been moving things along. There's been a lot of reform and regulation in our country on drug laws and descheduling. And so I think there's slightly more openness to working with these medicines. I think that other countries might be looking at what's going on here, but and seeing and in a wait and see state. But what I am seeing from our little vantage point in Switzerland, which is not as forward definitely as the US, is that there's now psychedelic conferences happening. I think the psychedelic society is probably around the world. There's an ongoing conversation. I've gotten multiple people who are like friends of my parents who said, "Oh, have you done this psychedelic stuff?" And it's working and it's interesting, and people are open minded to it. We're seeing a lot of number of traditional investors start to enter the space, and so
Mm.
as data and offerings expand, and the education of people improves, I think we'll see more and more offerings around the world.
Right. That's kind of how expecting to see it too. Like, uh, we need data, so we need studies to get published. We need conferences and people to talk for. It's kind of like ideas pollinating for a while, and then they need to take root. So
But
I
you know,
think,
there's a thousand active studies on psychedelics in the U.S. right now, so that's pretty
whew,
substantial. Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, or maybe more than that. Yeah,
People are noticing.
yeah.
Yeah, just in my own personal experience, like if we look at my email volume alone, tracks really well with how many studies are going. So yeah, it's coming and it is going. There's no way to really slow this thing down anymore. I don't think. Like we might have a speed bump or two somewhere along the way, but based on how successful the studies have been, and how careful and safe for the most part, like we've probably lost a few people, but the numbers are really low relative to these alternate treatments
Mhm.
and all the issues we're up against here. Um, it's a pretty kind of dire situation we're up against, and we've got to really go at this thing and have some courage here.
I mean, if you look at the numbers of people in America suffering from anxiety and depression pre-COVID, that was 20% of U.S. adults. It's
Mm,
50 million people, and post-COVID, that number bumped up to 100 million people. So that's almost 1 in 3 people that are suffering from symptoms of anxiety and depression. And
mm,
it's such a crisis that we really need to find means to support it differently or add to what's existing right now.
mm. Are you hopeful about any other interventions being used at scale beyond ketamine and cap,
Do you mean in
to,
terms of
to
other
treat this
psychedelics,
epidemic? Um,
or just in general?
anything generally. Like, I like the idea of tech, like wearables and whatnot, but I
Hmm.
haven't necessarily
Yeah,
seen how that gets fed back into behavior change too well. Other
I
than, oh, I
mean,
got to get my steps in.
right.
You know.
I think that technology is no longer separate from us, and so I think we're
Hmm.
we're transitioning towards an integration uh, between ourselves and technology, and it's
Right.
it's kind of weird and a little scary, but it's what's going on. And so I think that there's a lot of types of tech that are coming out. I tried a Muse the other day. I hadn't tried that before, to meditate,
Hmm.
and it's kind of cool. Like, it actually works well, like quieting your mind and bring your brain waves down. And there's probably a number of other tools and wearables, I've you on your Apple
Hmm.
Watch and on, that are all going to integrate with everything that we're doing. So I think we're really sort of moving forward towards an openness. But one thing's for sure is that, and there's some great work that's been done. I mean, if you look at the guys at Headspace, they did an awesome job at basically bringing meditation to the masses. um, People are looking for ways to feel better. Mental health isn't taboo anymore. And so I think that as we progress, we've got technology, psychedelics, like there's a lot of work being pushed forward, openness to like mindfulness based practices. And I think they're all going to support each other.
Yeah, it's pretty in line with where I'm at. We need kind of all of it, right? Like everything from group to these wearables at home to drug augmented therapies and much more. And yeah, I love this idea. Like it's a little creepy, but we do have to accept that the tech is not going to slow down. But the idea being that wearables plus our devices can help change our behavior for the better,
Mm-hmm.
for the better of our organism. But, I get the room for paranoia because I'm predominantly a paranoid person, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I think all these things, psychedelics included, are tools. And that's
mhm,
the way to look at them. They're not panaceas. They're not the answer. They're tools to help us in our own, mental health, personal growth,
mhm.
everyday life. And so as we start to consider them, a tool, I forget who said that, which wise, like, I don't know if it was Ram Dass or Thich Nhat Hanh, or I forget which, but like, a knife is basically like a tool, right? It can cut butter, it can cut bread, it can kill you, it can save your life. And I think these are not different.
Yeah, yeah. It's that informs my whole drug policy conversation generally. Yeah, it's these things are tools, and yeah, in the right hands, amazing. In the wrong hands, disaster. And
Yeah,
uh,
you could even talk about set and setting and like how that impacts psychedelics. And people like it's when someone tells you, oh, I think if everybody took LSD, the world would be better. But you could remember that back in the day, berserker Vikings used to eat a bunch of mushrooms before going to war. So there's a lot of spectrum of how you enter this space and how you're using them. So they're tools, right? Yeah.
right. I just always bring up Charles Manson. It's like the
Right.
easy one.
Yeah.
But people should read into that story. There's a lot there that's
Hmm.
helpful and informs drug policy conversation. But
Hmm.
this, yeah, the fact that right now they're kind of weapons being used against us in terms of drug policy laws and everything, and if we change that narrative and fund appropriately this research, they can absolutely be used as tools to save our minds
Hmm.
in really important ways.
And I,
Um,
I think we're going that way. And as I'm a Swiss citizen, so we're a country where drugs have been decriminalized for a long time. And we've had at train stations little containers where people could go and shoot up heroin and get, free needles and exchange it. And that has worked. It's been a good policy that has been, we don't have more people using drugs. We have less people using drugs because they have someone who can talk to them. And so, being a little open minded about drug reform. And I genuinely believe this is what's going on in this country, in spite of, the various
well, New
forces.
York just got its first in supervised injection site, the
Yeah,
first in the country,
exactly.
I think.
Yep, which is awesome. And I think that, people are realizing that, the war on drugs really never kind of panned out. And, it's not, no one's winning that war on drugs. It's just got a lot of victims. And so, things need to be rethought. And that's what's going on. Oregon's a testament to that. We're all doing different things. We took a very medicalized, FDA approved approach, which is our view of sort of like impacting things at scale. But there are other things, grassroots. And so the variety of all these movements make me extremely hopeful of the direction that
Mm.
we're all going into and what we're all participating in when we're building this industry.
Mm. I guess what organizations on the ketamine side are really exciting to you right now, or giving you some hope?
It's a good question. I spent so much time thinking about ours that I sometimes forgot to think about the
I kind of have
others.
the same problem.
Um, I think the guys at Awaken are doing a good job.
I was really
Um,
excited by them
yeah,
in Miami.
I think those guys are doing a good job. I've heard good stuff about Nushama. Um,
I got to
also,
meet a couple of them in Miami. I
yeah,
haven't seen the site or seen any of their results, but I generally kind of like their
yeah,
idea.
I've heard. Yeah, I've heard a number of like even the guys at Field Trip are doing a good job. I mean, like all these like I think what I like to look at is generally across the space, there hasn't been accidents. Like it's pretty safe. Like there are people who are doing it more or less responsibly. And again, I'm just not interested in commenting negatively on people.
Right.
But I think that there's a probably an overall will to do things right.
Right. Yeah, I think generally speaking, folks want it done right. They don't want to harm the rest of the ecosystem or their own financial future.
Right.
And they want to have good outcomes for their clients. I think generally most people want that.
I think so.
So it's hard to like come in to a space like this and purely be interested in money, because you start seeing a few things. And you're like, oh, I might have been better off over there
Right.
if I'm just here for making money, because
Yeah.
it's a really complicated space to operate in.
But it's going to happen. Like some are going to be more interested in money than others, and
Totally.
that's the nature of financially motivated organizations. But I think that there's ways to do it responsibly. I think we're doing it responsibly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And now, like, what does the next number of months look like for Journey? Are you going to continue to build your team internally, continue to try to recruit externally?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of progress. So once we closed our seed round in August, we've hired like pretty much almost like 90% of our team in the last couple of months, and now we're going to start building out the tech. We're going to start growing. So I think we're on a pretty speedy path to sort of like do some progress.
That's excellent. And well, I guess conference season's over, so there's not really anything to talk about physically. That's interesting. Yeah, so
I can share something nice.
Sure.
We were sponsors of Horizon's conference this year, and we came back last night from the conference, and I had like all these badges and stuff, and I recalled that in 2019 when I started down this path of thinking about how to get into psychedelic therapy, I had gone to the Zendo like workshop in Cosm, and then I went to Horizons, and I was in school at that point studying clinical psych, and I remember I didn't have a lot of cash, and I had literally like gotten a student pass to go to Horizons, and yesterday at the end of the conference, I got to see our logo like projected at the Cooper Union, and us on like the the agenda, and I got to like take a little scrap. I found a little scrapbook actually that I had done in 2019, and there was the agenda or the little book, the booklet for 2019 Horizons conference, and I got to add the sticker of our company and like this year's bulletin. And it was just really an awesome moment to be able to feel that, and meet with some of my heroes, and listen to like chat with Rick Dahlman and Leonard Picard and all these guys, and just really like that was a super special moment for me.
Yeah. Finally, yeah. It's hard to overstate how welcoming a lot of the folks at those upper echelons can be. Like, sometimes they're a little crusty, but like largely these people are like really friendly. They want like, I'll kind of reverse this. So like I had somebody bump into me at the Las Vegas conference to meet Delic, and they were just over the moon. It's like, I'm doing this for you. Like, I'm doing this so you get activated and you really start doing your own thing here. And I think a lot of these old legends are thinking similarly, like, find the others and light that fire. And like, just things can kind of go in a really positive direction. But it's cool that you had that moment.
I think it's just everybody is here doing this because we all believe in it. I think one of the beauties of the stage where we're at in our industry, and also the nature of our industry, is that it's still believers that are building it out. And so we're all figuring ourselves out a little bit, but we care about doing this. We've got a personal stake and personal experience into it. And I think that's true for the majority of people involved at this point. It's going to change, but for now it's still true. And so I think they all these people, recognize that, are enthusiastic about seeing what they've built essentially be passed down and taken on by others.
Yeah. And this is not just kind of, oh, cool, look at this molecule. It's more like, hey, this molecule now shows us the 20 new ways we haven't yet been thinking about the brain and the whole body. and the evolutions in medicine that are going to be coming, partly inspired, if not hugely inspired, by this world we're all a part of. Like, we're in for a fun ride with a lot of interesting things coming out. Just the things I'm hearing in the sidelines that I don't know enough about to even describe. But when I hear it, I'm like, wait, you're doing what and how? It's fascinating, and I can't wait to share it with everybody. And it's a brave new world for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, Jonathan, anything we haven't talked about yet that you wanted to get into about Journey Clinical?
Not really. I think that one thing that we can get in is that we're now, open to accepting new memberships. So we were closed until now, but now we're reopened to accepting people. At the time being mostly in New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. But if people are interested in hearing more about what we're doing and want to sign up, they can just go to our website at journeyclinical.com and push the button join us, and they'll get to have a call with me for now, which is fun, and I can have it. I'll be happy to have a chat with them about how we can support them, what we're doing, and we're really excited of growing our network of members and doing this work with them.
Outstanding. Yeah, it's going to be really cool. So I'm thankful you're here, part of the space, and you've got a really cool project cooking. Somehow I haven't had a cap session yet, so I should probably look into that.
There you go.
Yeah, I've certainly had it injected. I just won't call it cap.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I really appreciate you coming on the show to share with us. Let's hang out for a few more minutes here, and
sure.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll have you on the show again in the future.
So thank you so much for having me. It was lots of fun.